Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Had to get something to drink. This is 10 key quest design lessons from The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077. I've played a little bit of The Witcher 3. I have not touched Cyberpunk 2077, nor will I ever. Or maybe I will someday. I don't know. But I think this is an interesting topic, especially since these games apparently have a lot of quests. Hopefully they have some interesting insights about quest design in these sorts of games. Hey Bradley, hey Coco, hey Cyber Ninja Zero, hey Silver, hey Adek. With Witcher 3 is pretty good as an action RPG adventure game. Cyberpunk is kind of mess. Yeah, I mean, do you guys remember when I made that video about Cyberpunk and I was like, hey, you know, is Cyberpunk gonna be any good? And everybody dogpiled on me, but then I was vindicated and nobody apologized. From The Witcher 3, hooray. From Cyberpunk 2077, boo. 10 key model design lessons from Sully videos. Bringing the Discord conversation in. Don't think I was around with your channel then, but yeah, a lot of people had predictions like that. See, I don't exactly remember it that way. I think I was the one guy who saw that trailer and thought, this might not be great, and I feel like everybody else was like, oh my god, it's gonna be the best game ever. Oh my god, the hype was unreal. And then it came out, and everybody sort of had to eat a sour grape, or whatever the saying is. Witcher 1 is better than Witcher 3. I hear that from more people than just you, them. Welcome to the stream. Why do I stream on such a godforsaken hour? Because I live in Greenwich Mean Time time zone. This is just the way it is. I'll say that 2.0 fixed the gameplay. Yeah, I've heard good things from the patches. You know, a Pokemon channel that also called it? Wow, you know. Yeah, but like, did they call it, or are they just being Pokemon fans? Are they just being weird and they like, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day, a Pokemon channel, like, with all the insanity and nonsense that comes out of a Pokemon channel, eventually they hit on a good take, am I right? Nah, I don't hate Pokemon. Witcher 1 is a pretty good story, but the gameplay is outdated. Hopefully the remake fixes that. We're getting a remake? I feel like I knew we were getting a remake, but now that you say it, I'm like, are we? Or are you just saying it? Why do I live in the wrong time zone? It's, you know, it's just the way it is, you know? I can't help it. Witcher 1 is like Morrowind for people who are allergic to good gameplay. I was gonna call it a night, but then I got a Discord notification. You shouldn't stay up watching these. It's better to go to sleep at a good time and watch the what and like and subscribe and comment for the algorithm and all that. But yeah, you know, also you're allowed to just come in and dip out. It's fine. Let's get started. Before, because the people here are all trying to go to sleep. And as always, let me know if there are audio issues or whatever.
I'm not sure what I did to earn this already. Thank you so much for being here this early in the morning. I know there's so many more better things to do.
Thanks everybody in chat for being here so early in the morning. I know it's early in the morning for all of you. Thank you.
Do at 9, like sleeping. Thank you for being here. My dears, I was told to remind you to turn off all your buzzers and all devices that you decided to bring in and emit sounds. You know, whatever that is, you can fill it in. This talk is long as hell, so basically I'll like do as much as I can. I'll be speaking quite fast.
I don't know if this is necessarily going to be a rant. I think we're just going to be because I don't have any strong feelings about CD Projekt Red. I didn't fall in love with The Witcher 3. I played it for like an hour or 2 hours and then I bailed on it. And I've never thought of them as like a great studio. They've never been a studio that slighted me in any way. Like, I wasn't caught up on the Cyberpunk hype. I think they're a studio with a lot of talent, and, you know, they've apparently made some good games, and I'm just interested in hearing what they have to say about this.
A lot of things. Now, we will finish in like 55 minutes, hopefully.
Oh, you're all here for the rants. Oh, I'm sorry.
No time for questions, however. I'm going to stay with you, of course, till I'm dead. In a wrap-up room in 305. Okay, 305. This is where I'm going to be after this talk, and then we can, you know, sit together and chat for like 2 hours I have for you. So I hope that I'll be able to answer all the questions. So Having that out of the way, I'm really glad we have audio. I hope that's going to stay. Shout out to our technician. He's
oh, you're
amazing
here for the rants too? Well, you know,
thank
you
so
don't.
much, sir.
Sometimes you don't get rants. It's like swearing on the Discord. Sometimes I swear. Every few months, I'll drop an F-bomb in the Discord, but most of the times I don't swear.
Having that out of the way, let's go. So, my dears, my name is Pavel Sask. I'm a quest director inside the Project Red. So what I do, I direct quest, open world, and cinematic departments in our studio. We are the teams that design and implement the story together with our amazing writers.
Somebody's driving loudly
today
outside.
Today I'll be talking to you about a few things, and I'll mention a few words about me so you know who the hell I am.
Yeah, okay, so they definitely, GDC definitely gives them sort of a cheat sheet on how to structure their talks. Because they always do this. It's always a few words about me. And then it's like they have to give you like the bullet points of this, which from my experience, because I used to do this in videos too, this is not a good way to structure these sorts of conversations. Especially because they are seemingly just going off of bullet points rather than having actually scripted the whole conversation out. So I feel like there's just like this can be good if you really know how you're gonna thread the whole thing together, but because they always just kind of feel like they're winging it, I feel like emphasizing this structure really doesn't do them any good.
That I promise this will be short because this is not about it. Then we'll talk and look
what if they
into
all took the same course on a PowerPoint presentation? That's also possible.
The games and really
That's
the
also
reason why those
possible.
games are good. Of course, you know there will be some level of simplification to this pipeline because otherwise we would have spent here hours just discussing important elements to it. And then I'll move on to key quest design lessons. I have divided it into 3 parts for you so that you know you can kind of wrap your head around it. There will be mastering the plot, structuring the narrative, and improving the design. At the end, all of those lessons are actually designed in a way that they're supposed to give you as much takeaway as you can.
Also, I'm not a huge fan of Cyberpunk. Strangely enough,
is kind of a thing that I learned throughout like many years in the industry.
I feel like a lot of
Cyberpunk
Cyberpunk is really stuck in that whole people versus corporations narrative from like the 80s, from like Neuromancer and like Blade Runner and stuff like that. But I think that sort of, well, I mean, you know, it kind of goes with the genre, like the punk aesthetic and all that, but I feel like it's a sort of stagnant genre. Because I feel like every single image I see from a Cyberpunk game or a movie or a TV show, it looks completely interchangeable. I have not seen anybody bring anything new to the genre in a long time.
Shut down throughout the production, so you know, each of us has to go through that painful process. Then you know, I managed to join the Two Worlds 2 team where I was a lead writer, lead quest designer, and then joined our Witcher 2 team during the Witcher 2 Enhanced Edition work. I was just helping out, you know, with things, debugging. And
he looks like he's just escaped from prison, and he's wearing like a jacket over his prison attire, you know? The best Cyberpunk game was unironically Mad Max. Ooh, I like the System Shocks. The first 2, at least. I don't know. I mean, best Cyberpunk game. That is a pretty interesting question. Because, chat. What's everybody's favorite Cyberpunk game? Give me some ideas here.
Which is open world and cinematic.
Mad Max. That's not really Cyberpunk though. That's like a post-apocalypse sort of a game. That's not. Like, I don't feel like that is about the Cyberpunk aesthetic.
Working on Phantom Liberty.
Shadowrun?
It's around 60 people team, and shout out to them because I love them. And some of them are here, actually. So thank you for being here. Now, my dears, let's move on to the narrative pipeline first.
Okay, so the dude is like 420. Drugs. Like, look at how long it took for him to start. I've made videos back in the day where I was like, I'm going to take 10 minutes to just set everything up. And it's like, I don't do that anymore. I like to just get started right away because everybody just skips the intro. Like this is a 4-minute intro, 4-minute 20. Does Final Fantasy VII count? Oh yeah, I would say. Well, you know, I think that's like cyberpunk fantasy. I feel like it has too many sort of magical elements, right? I mean, it certainly dips its toes into cyberpunk.
First, hopefully this part won't be too boring.
Oh yeah, Deus Ex. Of course. Duh.
But I can put a picture there, so here you go. there is few things that
Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon. I kind of liked Blood Dragon, but I don't know if I would be able to go back to it.
With an adventure to our worlds and really make you feel how it looks like.
You start Final Fantasy VII as an eco-terrorist. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of cyberpunk in it, but I feel like it's a fantasy game that just dresses up like a cyberpunk game for the first for like the opening sort of crescendo or whatever the thing is called in narratives. Like the first act, they're like it's a cyberpunk game, but then it sort of evolves beyond that and becomes something different.
It can be really like at first few pages.
Yeah, for disc one, yeah.
And then we feedback that outline and it grows.
Turbo Overkill.
We get it to the point that we can start working on
all right. What does everybody think a cyberpunk game is? Like, what is cyberpunk to you? To me, it's. I guess you do need to have, like, because it's cyber, you need to have, like, machines and the relationship between human beings and machines. And because it's punk, I suppose you gotta have that, like, the little guy versus the man kind of deal going on. But at the same time, like, Blade Runner is pretty great, and that's not really about the evils of corporations. Well... Like, you have some crazy corporations in that universe, but I don't feel like that's so much the point. At least not in the movie. In the book, it's more like... I feel like it's been a while since I read the book.
Team steps in and they start working on the designs. Those are like designs that you can say they look
very like flashy light in a non-modern world. I also think that this is not mandatory, but I think it's kind of mandatory. Like it's very much encouraged. You need to have some. What's the right way to say this? Asian inspired imagery. Like you want to have some Korean or Japanese lettering. You want to have some district from China in the middle of cyberpunk neon LA or whatever. I feel that's very much encouraged. You want to have like a neon samurai or whatever.
Of a dialogue there, but not too much. It's just an example. We do not really write dialogues in those documents yet. And of course, that iteration process on the design documents, it happens together with cinematic design team and also open world team and also other others like writers, for instance, and other important departments in our company. We are trying to include as many voices as we can. And then we move on to the draft implementation. Actually, those documents are used when they're approved. They're used.
Final Fantasy VII has always sort of felt a bit disjointed between the beginning parts and the whole rest of the world stuff. I feel like there's kind of a stylistic change, but I never felt it was very disjointed. I kind of just felt like you have this horrible city, and then you have you can get out of the city. It's just I don't feel like it was very disjointed.
Produce
Neo-Orientalism.
So this is when our level design team steps in. We are starting
is
to work
District 9 Cyberpunk?
So basically, the quest designers are sketching them out. We do not write them, we just sketch them out.
Isn't it?
What the scene is about.
Do aliens fit into Cyberpunk?
Sure that the quest is playable. And then this whole
maybe it's because you don't like the horrible city.
Companies called first playable. For us, it's just draft. And when the quest is playable and all the quests are playable, that means that the whole game is playable, and that is basically the goal of the draft stage. And afterwards, we move on to pre-alpha, alpha, pre-beta, beta, and then we polish the game and ship it in that period. This is how it looks like, though, in practice. So when you have the story outline, we iterate the hell out of it, and then when it's approved, it goes to quest design, iteration happens there, and to the draft implementation with iterations are happening there. What's important is that it actually can be disapproved, you can call it. It can be sent back to the previous stage. And I think this is a key thing, like why our things are working the way they're working, because we basically do not resign until we're really, really happy with whatever we have produced. And sometimes we do a lot of iterations and we bounce a lot back and forth between those stages. And every single time when we actually move on and let's say update something in a meaningful way on the draft implementation level, we also go back and really try to update the documents, at least till the alpha stage.
Okay. This feels pretty straightforward.
That was the most boring part out of the way. Let's now.
Yeah, okay. So he's just setting up
the key quest design lessons. So
I don't get in this sort of cyberpunk world. This is completely outside the purview of this conversation, perhaps. But why, if you live in this universe, would you get these awful line grits shit stapled on your face? I don't get that.
Yes. The thing is that I will need to talk about the story. And to talk about the story,
how new is this video? 20. Well, the video came out 4 months ago, but the talk was. They don't say. When the hell was this talk? Hello? Hello? Probably. Oh wait, it's like
So if you didn't play Cyberpunk
2023. Ta-da! This is fairly new.
2077
You some
or
sort of
Witcher 3,
awk
you need to boom.
racist? Yes. Look. I love everybody. I love all the people on God's green earth. But if you're doing this shit to your face, straight to the trash with you. I got no time for you.
So I think everyone's gone. That was supposed to be gone. That's the last warning, really, to turn off the video or just leave the
I
room.
kind of assume the
I'm
lines
trying-
are
I'll try to do my
uncovered
best.
lines
Who
and
knows when that
augmentation.
happens, or sometimes
Like, yeah, I get that, but
let's move on to the first stage, which is mastering the plot. I'll be talking about
I
three
feel like
main-
it's kind of like that image of the crate, where like not crate, like a box, and then you could put like some lines on the box, and it becomes a cyberpunk box. It's like, it's just a way to sort of fold the visual into the style, I guess. Future equivalent of a face tattoo, yeah, maybe. I'm speaking right to your soul.
major lessons, engagement, impact, and believability. This slide is only for you for tracking where we are. We will now talk about the engagement. When we were working on The Witcher 3, Blood and Wine, the opening quest, the Beast of Beauclair, there was a moment when you, as a player, as Geralt, you go in and you investigate. And then there's this moment of autopsy. There's this guy chopped off on a table. The quest was designed by Bravery, our lead quest designer. And what we wanted to do there, we wanted to make sure that as a player, you'll be intrigued by what the hell is happening. You know, like why this guy is chopped off in such a way. And every single detail that you actually find out throughout this investigation is including in introducing some new things that you wouldn't expect. And every single step is actually surprising in a way. And that is I would say, like one of the elements, one of the factors that's really driving us when we are constructing our story. We want the player to want the story.
Okay, I like that. There's also I think it's a fairly recent GDC talk they did on detective games and setting up mysteries and gamifying that, which we'll be doing that. We'll be covering that GDC video in the not too distant future because I'm really interested in that sort of gamifying being a detective. You don't have to
shove the story into player's throat. You can structure it in a way that player is craving for it, and player really wants it. And the key thing that I wanted you to memorize from this is that by subtraction of key information, you can actually make the player really intrigued and really curious about
that repeating GIF is annoying.
The investigations actually are really interesting. Typical element of that. And Witcher 3 is really a detective.
One of the weirdest criticisms of The Witcher 2 and 3 I've heard is that Geralt is too attractive in them. Is he too attractive? I guess he's kind of handsome.
Did this article when they actually properly identified what Witcher 3 was trying to be when in terms of a genre. It is a detective game in a dark fantasy setting. And not that many people maybe felt it from the very beginning, but when designing the quests and so on, we were using a lot of investigation mechanics, and that naturally sent us to actually creating many more stories that will be simply about finding out what the hell happened. Now, another example I wanted to show you is from one of the most beloved quests.
Okay, so audience wants to work for the next piece of the story, and deliberate absence of key information is instrumental. Yes, I think. Let's put on our thinking caps and absorb this information, because this, like, again, pretty straightforward stuff here. Deliberate absence of key information, that sort of seems like you're designing your quests specifically with the idea of a mystery to be unraveled in mind rather than a story being told. So I wonder if they were working at all with like onion skins, or if this is just like, here's story piece 1, and then when you figure out what's missing, you get the story piece 2. I actually really like. I think my favorite variation of that comes from PT, out of all games, where the whole point is that you're just supposed to notice what has changed in your environment. And I don't know if I talked about this on stream before, but if you're a fan of Uzumaki, I figured out that that's how you make that a video game. Uzumaki is that as the town gets more and more absorbed by the spiral, you just go on a day-to-day, and every single day, something has changed. The spiral has invaded some new aspect of the town. And you advance the narrative by figuring that out. And sometimes it's obvious stuff, like just the lighthouse is going crazy in the horizon, so you go to the lighthouse and you do that whole gig. And sometimes it's just like you go to school and one of your classmates is a snail. So, yeah. I think this is a good point. This is a good point.
Now, another example I wanted to show you is from one of the most beloved
onion skins. Onion skins come from I think it originates in Call of Cthulhu. It was at least popularized, I believe, by Call of Cthulhu. So if we think about it, like, you know, the idea there is you have a narrative, and the player's job is to sort of crack through the narrative, right? So this is the player here. This is the story, and here everything within this circle. This is the information. This is the happenings that the player has access to at a specific point in the game, and when they figure out how to, like, they can use all of this information to pierce into this space, and that gives them access to a new bunch of information or assets to unlock the story with. And they use those to pierce into this one, and they use those to pierce into this one, and that's when you get into, like, the resolution of the story. The idea specifically with Onion Skins is because Call of Cthulhu is like a Lovecraftian horror tabletop module system, so you're continually cracking, like, different layers of you start in the real world ostensibly, but you're always piercing deeper and deeper into the supernatural that's sort of hiding outside of view. I believe that's how it's laid out.
Cyberpunk 2077, The Dream On. This is one of the opening scenes. Let's watch it together.
Is there an optimal number of layers? No. Well, you know, like, how much information do you want to script out? How much information do you want to give to the player? How long is the game? It's like, just, you know, just toy around with it. I also believe this is how, I believe there is, and I have no, like, I have some evidence to suggest this, but I don't have hard proof, but I have evidence to suggest that this is how Bloodborne used to work at some point. Don't take it to the bank, because I'm not 100% sure. We don't know for a fact, but I think this is how Bloodborne was, where you go to town and it's just sort of a gothic game, and you know how, like, it unravels and becomes like a weird eldritch horror game. I think, and especially because you have, like, once you get a certain amount of insight, all of a sudden you get new phenomena. And we know that mad ones used to spawn at a certain insight threshold. We know, like, you can see the amygdalas when you've reached a certain insight threshold. I think that was supposed to be a much bigger component of the game.
Grab a seat, please. I'll explain why I asked you to come over.
What did I even come back to? MS Paint Onions?
Not the usual kind, though.
So unusual how?
A couple of days back, dead of night, something wakes me. A noise. I grab my pistol and come out of the bedroom.
Is this what the game Layers of Fear is about? I only played the alpha for Layers of Fear like 9 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. Didn't love it. I think that it was like a gimmick, and as like a 5-minute section in a bigger game, I like that gimmick, but I didn't really think it had a lot of steam. But I don't know if they iterated a lot on it for the final release or the sequel.
Of course, we notified SSI about the incident. Our private security.
Security look into this? Say anything?
This is where things get a little weird.
They claim there's no sign of a break-in or of a shot being fired.
Security cams didn't record anything. Guard outside didn't see or hear anything.
You know what GDC talk I want is this is a talk that has not happened, and this is a talk that I want to see happen. I want Ted Price or Brian Hastings or any of the Insomniac guys to come in and talk about the development of Ratchet and Clank 3 and like what went wrong here, because they've talked a bit about it in like their commentary Let's Play series on it, but I want a really formal setting for it, because I think the game we got was really good considering, but I also think there were really obvious ways of fixing the game and making it better which they didn't utilize.
Must have had a bad
Stuff like maybe you should just reuse some enemies from the first game and not just like the amoebas. Like maybe if you, because one of the big problems with the combat there is that enemies don't really have knockback, and I feel like that's something they could have worked on. And like they had the whole Tyrannois deal going on, which is kind of plot relevant, but at the same time, like maybe you just bite the bullet and have a plot hole in that sort of missing Tyrannois storytelling there. in order to incorporate all of the older biological enemies from the first game back in. So like the scorpion guys and the sort of claw snippy guys and the evil fish and all that. And you just create new models for them, new sort of machine models.
Convenient answer.
As you can see, in this particular scene, we have set it up in a way that there's a deliberate substance.
Have I played Resistance 2? I've not played any of the Resistance games, actually.
Player doing the investigation, there's a moment when you're actually getting to this back room, there are those big machines there. When you scan them, when you can see actually on the scanning in the UI, you can see that it's an unknown tech, that it's a system that is not in a database, that it's basically being not recognized. As a player, you are taught actually that using the investigation mechanics and scanning basically in Cyberpunk, you're going to find out what happened, what it is, and so on. In this case, Patrick Mills, the quest designer for this quest...
Players' drive to obtain information increases engagement with the story. Yeah, I think this is a nice observation, and I always like it when I just find myself intuitively wanting to know what happened, and the presentation of the narrative is very in harmony with the way I'm organically just playing the game. So like Morrowind, I just want to get into the world and explore, and when I go into the world and explore, I happen to meet a lot of fun people, and they tell me a bunch of interesting stories from this universe, and it's like, beautiful.
Orkan, the writer for this quest, they have decided to actually very deliberately remove those informations for the player and really say, I know that you are using the scanning and you want to know, you want to find out what actually happened, but you won't find out. And this is really, really deliberate play with the player. And throughout that, and it's really, really important that when you're constructing your story by doing this, you can really make the player very curious. And I brought up, of course, the Dream On as one of the examples of such quests because I think it has done it the best out of everything that out of the quests we have at Cyberpunk 2077. But both Witcher and Cyberpunk.
When I explore Morrowind, I encounter fun people who call me slurs. Yeah, well, video games. Sometimes video games get a little real.
So we'll now
you
jump
Inuit.
into the impact. And this is one of the more powerful, I would say, lessons that I can give you. When we are creating the story, we are
lesson 2
from a very beginning. Created around those emotional banging moments. What you're seeing here actually is Judy. She is broken down after the moment. Give you. When we are creating the story, we are trying to, from a very beginning, create it around those emotional banging moments. What you're seeing here.
This is why again, just write a script, read from the script. Don't like, if this isn't your native language, I get that, but emotional banging moments, really? And I know I'm no better, but I'm not on a big stage doing a big presentation. I'm just like some jackass talking over him. But yeah, impact. From the get-go, design the story with the goal of impacting the player emotionally. Yeah, I mean,
actually,
sure.
Judy. She is broken down after the moment of what has happened to her friend. I'm not going to spoil it much.
But
more. It's really hard.
I very rarely get like emotionally invested in a story that's presented like this, where it's just like dialogue choices and the character talks to me and stuff. I feel like emotional impact in video games always comes through a lot cleaner, at least to me, when it relates to the gameplay. So losing aggro in Shadow of the Colossus feels infinitely more impactful to me than any crying animated robot woman or whatever is going on in this scene, or that Armored Core 6, after Snail 2, a V2 Snail shoots us after we fight the Ibis series. Like, that is impact, because it's all coming through in the gameplay, rather than in just these weird dialogue sequences. And I'm not a big fan of these dialogue sequences. I don't know if I've said that a million times over the years already.
And as a player, you have met Judy already.
There's a lot of emotional banging in CD Projekt Red games. Oh yeah. And in Cyberpunk, they actually let you have a big dick or a small dick. So you could get some good banging, you could get some bad banging.
Make you as a player empathize with her.
These story impact moments are risky if you don't care about the characters.
Emotional moments that are going to drag the player to our stories. This quest was designed by Sarah Grimmer, who's sitting here in the front of the row. And
it's also interesting, something like New Vegas, I don't think I cared about any character there. I liked some of the characters there, but I don't think I cared about any of them. But those characters are also very much there just to sort of be not sounding boards, what's the word I'm looking for? Where they exist mainly so that you can express yourself at them. Sort of springboards for you to characterize your own guy in this universe. And that's a very different way of utilizing these sorts of characters. Whereas here it maybe feels like, and just from what he's saying, I haven't played the game, I don't 100% know. It feels like maybe the characters here are more of an ends in and of themselves.
And Magdalena Zich, who's the
See, they
writer,
were clapping for it.
did
It's a
a
good point.
phenomenal job on
Derosine hit hard. Oh, I need to play Derosine. Did everybody see? Did everybody see? Channel friend Kasidiv made a video recently on Derosine, and I watched it and I was like, damn, I need to buy a VR headset and play Derosine.
We discovered that we actually have to add it. And it was fairly early, of course, when we discovered that particular beat has to be in the story. And this is what I want to encourage you to do. Like,
oh yeah, in Resident Evil 3, you have Courtney Gears.
Like the moments when you can really like punch the player, your reader, your audience into the gut and really make them feel things. Because this is the most important thing. And when I'm always training,
you saw that video, Cyber Ninja Zero? That's good. That's good.
We want to teach the player, the designer,
Kasidiv does great videos.
What player is thinking and what player is feeling. And that is really your job as a narrative designer. I really believe in that. You really need to try to control what players thinking and feeling. Super important for building good, impactful stories.
You need to try to control. What did he say there?
Is thinking and what player.
The designer needs to control what the player is thinking. I feel like it's more about nudging the player. You know, you like. Sort of just lean on the player, like push them a little bit there, but the player's always going to have like an organic reaction to everything. You can't really control people with math.
I really believe in that. You really need to try to control what players thinking and feeling. Super important for building good, impactful stories. Another example.
And I feel like maybe this is just a language barrier thing, but I feel like when you take the word control rather than nudging, it sort of gets you into that place of you're trying to. So like in Fumito Ueda games, the emotion and the storytelling comes through really organically from the gameplay. But I feel like when you go from... because that's how they actually write those stories. He just has like images and ideas in his head, and then he figures out what actually works with the mechanics, and then they tell that story with those mechanics that those mechanics are good at. But I feel like when you go with this mindset of, I need to control how the player feels, you're liable to... maybe try to use mechanics to do something they're not really good at. Maybe it's just a language barrier thing.
It comes from The Witcher 3 when I was working on the Battle of Cormoran. That's the quest I designed and implemented. And I needed a moment for Ciri to actually make a decision that she is not going to be hunted anymore. She's not going to be a prey. She is going to be a hunter. And she's going to be going after the wild hunt. But to do so, I knew that I need a substantial event that will really break her inside. And that was the moment when I proposed to our writers team to kill Vesemir. And at first...
Oh my god, spoiler! Vesemir!
No!
With,
no,
Vesemir!
We reached the conclusion that actually it's a really good decision to basically really make Ciri make that step, make that change. Some of you might be a psychologist. I'm a psychologist by education. There's a lot of events in our lives that actually can tremendously change us. Like for instance, people that have been in concentration.
I don't mind having my emotions controlled if a dev can actually do that. Yeah, it's not. I'm not saying like I'm not saying I feel violated or anything like that. I'm just saying I don't think it works. I don't think you can control the player's emotions. I think you can create a context for the player to organically come up, like explore their own emotions, but trying to sort of make the player feel something rather than figuring out, like rather than letting the player feel something themselves organically through gameplay. It's just I really feel it's just the word control rather than direct or nudge or like, I really just don't like the word control.
And what happens in their life and changes them really tremendously is something that I kind of needed, right? But to build it in a game, I really had to be very careful. That's why I picked Vesemir, because his character is built up and prepared really well. You get to know him throughout many quests, so that's why this moment was so impactful. And also, I wanted to do something that players wouldn't believe that we would.
Really? Okay, you know what? Earlier complaints about these looping GIFs, it's getting to me. I'm getting tired of this.
The second point I wanted to make here, like really when you are building those impactful stories, no holds are barred. Like you can do anything that's needed to make the player feel things. And here's another example I wanted to show you. There is a moment when V wakes up on a landfill in Cyberpunk 2077. Let's watch the scene together.
Heavier than she looks. Now, listen, dog. I have done exactly what you asked. So let's you and me figure...
荒坂様、お父様の殺害犯を演じました。この女で間違いありません。
What did I say? Asia? Asia? Asia is encouraged in Cyberpunk.
Quiet.
Ow! So,
Yeah, so, like, what I really don't like here about this whole scene is that, number one, we're not interacting in any way. And I'm just getting from context clues that this is one of our friends. This is like a character we hang out with, I guess. But you're not, like, I don't... This isn't aggro falling off the bridge. Aggro falling off the bridge is like, you've actually organically through gameplay built a real bond with that creature. This guy, you know, he's just a guy who's like talking in a cutscene. And maybe like he's a good character to have on like quests with you or whatever, but I don't know, maybe I really just I don't get really attached to characters when I interact with them like this, where I'm like picking dialogue choices and such. I just, this does nothing for me.
cool shit happening is, you know, Transformers beating the shit out of Kimura.
Hey, wait. Stop. Here we go. And the fat guy shot you in the head and left you for dead. He's no friend? Oh, okay. So, like, so, wait a minute. What am I supposed to feel from this sequence, then? Is it that different from Morrowind? Well, say, the thing about Morrowind is that I don't care about any character in Morrowind. I think there are some interesting characters in Morrowind, but the experience in Morrowind is all about becoming one with the land and all that jazz that I've said a million times before. Whereas, from what I'm picking up here, it really seems like the point here is to sort of get invested in these characters, and I don't think. You know what? There's absolutely examples to where I do like characters when I interact with them through this sort of framework, but it's rare. Usually, I look at this and I'm like, nah.
So, what's interesting that when you're actually creating your stories,
sounds like I don't like graphical adventures.
But sometimes those things need a proper build-up. It
Maybe.
takes time. It takes
What if
time,
Acro the horse dies in a cutscene despite using him a lot in the game? Yeah, but like this is what I love about. So Metal Gear Solid is great as sort of a counterexample to very cutscene-heavy games, because people like I love Metal Gear Solid, and the amazing thing about Metal Gear Solid, if you play the first Metal Gear Solid, is that first of all, like the whole game and the whole story is about like the disillusionment Snake has with reality itself. It's sort of postmodern blobbity bloobity. And it's like, is it a movie? Is it a video game? It's like, you know, the reality Snake operates in is really hazy from the get-go. But also, just on a pragmatic, practical level, every single cutscene there is contextualizing some piece of gameplay to come up. So even if you don't care at all about any of the characters, it's still kind of important to watch the cutscenes to pick up what you need to do when you get the controls again. And I can't really say that for a lot of these sorts of games. A lot of them are more, we have a cutscene here because we feel like you haven't talked to the characters in a while. An aggro dying in a cutscene, it's like, yeah, but it's still aggro, right?
Is also build your story around something that, together with Thomas Marhefka,
and will they make Metal Gear Plasma?
And normally when you're actually working with the designers, a lot of them will actually propose to you lots of different like cool scenes and things that could happen. The thing is, like, I do not think that this is a proper way to build a story and tell a storyline.
The horse dies. Look, it's Shadow of the Colossus. You have an obligation as a gamer to play Shadow of the Colossus because it's one of the best games. And if you haven't, I have no, I can't, I'm not gonna take any responsibility for spoilums, you know?
It, you know, kind of concludes the storyline of Dex as a character. It introduces Takemura as an important main story character here for us. And it's also a short, concise, very punchy scene that's very memorable in the same time. We had actually...
See, I don't know. I don't think I would remember this sequence very much if I was playing the game. I feel like this is something that you would be better off scripting in actual gameplay. Like maybe have, because the player starts the scene by waking up, maybe have us actually wake up and have to team up with fat ass over here. I think his name is Dexter. Yeah, Dexter. We have to team up with him, and we're like fighting some guys, but maybe I don't know. I don't super love that sort of scripted style, but I feel like at least that way I might remember it, and I think to remember it, you really need to have some sort of relationship with this guy, or you need to have directed the sequence prior or something. I don't know. I feel like this is a very non-impactful
A lot of discussions internally.
like in a movie, maybe this is an impactful scene. I don't think this does a lot for me as a video game.
Asked to really go after decks and do that, but throughout like many discussions, weighing like pros and cons, we reached the conclusion that would be probably
Honestly, games with animal
that,
companions as a
take
main
care of
mechanic
that
have the
and use it.
spoiler, the animal doesn't die at the end.
And use it as an introduction. So one last thing for you to memorize here. Outside those
Do it
emotional
Half-Life
moments, we
style?
also do great
No,
scenes,
I
and
hate
stories, I would say,
Half-Life's way
secondary.
of telling stories. Can we talk about that just for a second? I think Half-Life is the most overrated game series of all time. I appreciate a lot of the stuff those games do, but oh my god, those games are such shit in so many ways. And that idea of just like, oh yeah, the player stands there while the characters have conversations. No, thank you. No, thank you. If your game is so dialogue heavy, maybe just don't make a game. Or like, it's like you make a game about, toying around with a gravity gun and shooting enemies and such. How are you going to do these sequences where characters talk to each other? Well, we're just going to make them unkillable, and we're just going to have the player bored to death while these scripting sequences, like, they just play out. And it's like, there has to be a better way of doing this, guys. Come on.
The great emotional, impactful stories that you're building, but have that in mind. If you only have the storyline that's constructed out of the cool
Now
scenes,
you know how I
you'll
feel
see
about
that
Ocarina
there's
of Time,
no soul to
overrated
the story.
stuff
There's a
everyone
great,
loves.
storytelling,
Yeah,
I would
but
say-
Ocarina of Time, so the thing about Ocarina of Time is that it still has like themes. It still manages to elicit an emotion from the mechanics. It's all about that juxtaposition of the innocent past to like that horrible future, and you keep going back and forwards, and it's a real sort of dire. It has like that feeling of futility, which you get a lot more from Majora's Mask, actually. But I think that Ocarina of Time is like the perfect distillation of nostalgia in interactive form anybody has ever assembled. I don't think Half-Life has anything like that going for itself. I appreciate it as... Like, I can appreciate the level design. I can appreciate the scenario direction in Half-Life, absolutely. Ravenholm, I love Ravenholm. I can appreciate a lot of that stuff, but I just don't think there is a lot to Half-Life when it comes to the story, and it's a lot. I feel it's a lot of style over substance.
Theory about fire and embers. Maybe you heard about it. It's basically the fire is everything that is the soul of the story, and embers is really what I see. Is the VFX, is cool shit happening. Is
you don't stand around, you hop around the room and land on their heads.
Yeah, visual spectacle, but there's no fire, in it. And I think like we as storytellers and narrative designers, we always need to take care.
Yeah, Half-Life 2 is full of unskippable cutscenes,
Absolutely.
pretending they're not
I think
cutscenes.
so,
It kills
so
replayability. Yeah.
So right now we will move on to believability.
Okay, believability. Given a screen time and space for each story thread, and don't rush it. Screen time. Are you talking about cutscene time?
The industry, and I'm here speaking about also, myself. We are sometimes very uncomfortable with actually giving the player the moments when there's nothing to do. And there are moments when you are not supposed to run in and basically build something new and do something, and you don't have any new objective. Look at this example. This is a moment when you actually had your intimate moment with Judy, and you're there, embraced, looking at her, having a smoke, and there's nothing else going on.
Okay, so this is a shitty point he's making. I don't know. I think there's definitely something to be said about quiet time, right? That's absolutely true. But this is not a piece of gameplay here. This is a cutscene I would skip every time if I had the option to skip it. I don't understand what the game is getting from. I don't know, you're hanging out with a character, but you're not actually hanging out with the character, right? You're watching a cutscene of your guy hanging out with the character. So, what are we doing here? If you want to do this, I feel like if you want to just have these sorts of little moments, I don't know. Maybe you go to her apartment or whatever. Maybe just have it be so that you can play some video games with her. Unlike you can play one of those 8-bit Cyberpunk video games with her, and she has like fun commentary with you, and you guys have fun banter while you do it. Like that's how you build those sorts of moments, or something like that. But please don't do these. Please don't do this.
There's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to be. It's just being with her.
Getting to the forest in Kingsfield, the ancient city, is my favorite quiet time and quiet time moment in a game. Are you talking about getting to the well?
Take out the trash, right?
Because I really love that sequence too.
You normally like spend time with them, right? You embrace them. You just look into each other, and this is what you do. And like as a studio, we have learned that we need to give space to our characters to really shine on the screen, to really give them time to do all of those elements.
But also, this is a point I think we talked about it just yesterday when we did the Amnesia stream. Well, we talked about it. He talked about it in the stream, where it is always going to feel really weird going from playing a game that's all about like optimization, and you're like, oh my god, he talked about competitive mechanics. So that's like shooting, that's aiming, that's placement and stuff. It's always just a really weird thing when a game goes from asking you to be really cognizant of stats and positioning and like all those sorts of competitive moments, and then they ask you to just sit down and watch a cutscene. It's like, what are you doing here? You have to like, if you want me to have like sort of relaxed, intimate moments with these characters, I feel like the rest of the game really needs to be operating on the same wavelength. Is that fair, chat? Is that fair?
Like, you can probably search in your memory. There's literally a few examples that come to mind. And that really is
you climb up the stairs and see light shining through the door and are rewarded with both peaceful serenity and a save point. Kingsfield 4 is the good stuff.
That this slaps so much in Cyberpunk is the work of our amazing cinematic design team that makes sure...
You're going to get tea, you traitor.
Cinematic animators, they make sure that all the animations are really fluid. Look how believable she is, how she acts, when she looks at you. And this is how you see her in the game, because your face is literally next to her. So when you have those moments, don't rush. Another moment is like there's the situation when you're actually together with Panam, right? Like there is the sandstorm coming and so on. You're supposed to sit with her and so on. And I remember watching so many YouTubers and streamers and so on, influencers playing our game when she actually put the legs on your legs, and everyone's like, "Ooh, what's gonna happen now?"
That's because I feel like a lot of his points make a lot of sense in like a movie or a TV show. This I agree with. If you're like having a conversation with somebody and it sort of locks you into that conversation interface. I really appreciate this when the characters sort of animate to contextualize the relationship a bit and give you an idea of what they're like. This is pretty nice.
We never do that. That should be like just two characters in idle and over-the-shoulder camera just talking to each other, right? Like that's what we are used to. But that's not life. That's not how people act, normal people. That's why, our cinematic designers, when they were working on that scene, they had this idea actually to start introducing the connection between V and Panam that is sort of getting...
But there must be a better way of showing this than just a looping GIF. Come on, brother.
So
brother.
Human-like moments are really important. And I know I'm talking too much and I need to move on. I wanted to point out something super important. Make sure that in your storyline, when you are building a story, it's not only about the plot. So when you're meeting the characters, they are not telling you about what's next to do, what's our next objective, but there are also moments when they are themselves and they speak what's important for them. That's why there is a moment when you go for coffee with Carrie. That's why there is a moment when you just lie embraced with Judy and there's nothing else going on. That's why there is a moment when you're with Panam here, she puts her legs on your legs and you're just there together. And they do not talk about the plot. They do not talk about like what's next to happen about Yorinobu Arasaka Saburo and the chip in your head and all that. They don't. They are people and they talk about what's important for them, right? So please remember about this. When you're building a storyline, do not pack their only plot, but also characters, who they are, and make them speak about themselves. And that's important, especially in AAA, because like we normally don't have a budget to basically pack it all in, and it's important to reserve a bit of that budget to be able to do those things. Please remember about this. Now, we'll move on now to the next section. This pretty
so yeah, believability. I mean... Yeah, like I think it's a mixed bag.
Now we'll talk to you about structuring narrative. And there are three parts here, brevity, choices, and consequences. Now, some of those elements are pretty much separate talks on their own, but I will try to give you as much as I can during this talk. So first and foremost, the cinematography and cinema industry a long time ago has figured out how actually from the movies eliminate so-called busy work. And what I mean by that, there is a situation when you're together with a character, you find out about something, and then you go into another character and you talk to them and basically refer everything, and you sort of go on and repeat everything. This is pretty basic when it comes to storytelling, but I see it all the time, even in the movies, in games especially. So there are situations when we as designers, we need to look really in our writing, in our scenes, but also like in a structure of our quests, and be like, okay, when are we actually repeating informations, and when things are not needed? Because when you remove the fat, when you trim the fat, cut, then the story becomes much more punchy. Here's the example from Battle of Kermor.
Yeah, I appreciate this point. I can't tell you how much of my life I've wasted doing busy work. Because, like, oh my god, you want information? Well, you're gonna have to go out there and find 5 mushrooms for me. Like, come on, you just give me the information, old lady.
Morin.
Damn you.
So there was a moment when I
Another
knew that
good
we had
gif.
to actually plan out that scene, and that's the scene that Igor Straczynski, right now, he's our narrative director. Igor was working on that scene. We knew that at this point, we don't really want the player to discuss with Siri every single nook and cranny how that the defense of Kaer Morhen is going to be. Because you're going to see it in a moment. So why the hell have it talked about it? So that's why we basically decide, okay, let's just use a simple cut here. And they say, Geralt says, okay, you know what, let's just focus on it and discuss it in detail. That's it, it cuts, and then you're in the action, basically, as the Wild Hunt is attacking.
Did you miss anything?
Yeah,
you missed a lot.
You
tea
that actually we
drinker.
have been learning throughout Witcher 3, but I think we have mastered it, or maybe get closer to it during Cyberpunk, is how you do your exposition. And when it comes to the Cyberpunk 2077, everything is, you are all the time in action there, in the shoes of you. We have almost no cuts. We have no cutscenes. You're always there yourself.
Yeah, okay, so I don't think that's a flex. I hate this idea that having no cuts is somehow a thing to be proud of. I hate it in movies. I hate it in video games. It's okay to have a cut. It's like, why exactly is it in any way impressive that a story just goes on without any cuts in it? There's nothing. This is completely uninteresting.
We have to be very strategic about like how we divide the information.
Exposition should be divided into scenes of different weight and scope.
Before I explain, I need to mention to you the signal and noise theory. Maybe some of you heard about it. Signal is all the messages that you want to give the player, all the important information, everything that you want the player to learn. Noise is everything the player can do in the same time, therefore making the signal less visible. So, for instance, here, the example that I'm showing you right now, the moment when you're going for a reconnaissance with Takemura. At first, you're actually walking with him. This is something that we call internally walk and talk. You're walking basically, and Takemura tells you, and they talk about things that are slightly less important. Because here, the noise is high, I can go naked, I can jump around, I can do things, throw grenades maybe, and not really listen to him. The noise, but the potential noise is quite high. And the signal is pretty low, because I can do so many things. But then as a player, you actually get at the top of the building to sit down, together, look at Takemura, then the signal is high and the noise is low. Because I have a control over the camera, I know where the player is looking, and then I can actually give the player all the important information about the plot and the characters.
Yeah, okay. This is I'm not loving what I'm hearing here, because as a believer in the Fumito Ueda school of interactive storytelling, I believe that you tell the story with the mechanics. You don't lock the player out of mechanics so that you can have a character vomit important exposition at them. Come on.
So when you look in all that sequence, you can see that sequences in Cyberpunk, and they were like that in Witcher 3 too.
But like, again, in terms of if you're making this sort of game, like, yeah, obviously, if you're giving the player important information, probably you need to dial it around how much stuff the player has access to.
So it's really good trick in a way to divide your exposition like this. Ask yourself a question: okay, what actually is the important part of my narrative, and what is not, or what is slightly less important, and what is on
I don't really know about this stuff, but I've heard less cuts is good for action scenes. See, even that's not true. If you ever watched Jackie Chan movies, like the old Hong Kong movies he used to do, I think he cuts with every single punch. And he's figured out a way to use the cut to increase the impact of every blow. So he'll do a punch, and then he'll do a cut where he's like a few frames before the punch, and he does it from a different angle to give you like the actual force of the punch being reinforced. Like, obviously you can use cuts poorly. You can use them to just sort of hide how lousy the action is and stuff. And you have to be cognizant of the player's ability to read the space and stuff. But just the idea of, well, we did this game and it doesn't have any cuts. This isn't a flex, right? Like, there's no cuts in Morrowind. There's probably a couple of cuts in Morrowind, but like, you get my point. Where just because you don't have any cuts, that doesn't add anything. And it's so weird to me. I remember when God of War, the first Viking God of War game came out, people were using this as some sort of flex. I was flabbergasted. Like, what are you talking about? You didn't use any cuts. System Shock 2 had like, what, one cut in the entire thing? 2 cuts, maybe between like loading screens, but that was only because they needed to actually physically load it. If they could have just had you They could have done the Half-Life thing of just putting you on a rail and making you wait for 2 minutes while it moved you far enough away from one area that it could dump it out of the memory, and then they could load the new area. They could have done that, and then there's no cuts, but hey, I think Half-Life would have been better if it had had a lot of cuts.
Maybe your ego.
See, this is becoming a rant after all.
It's important story information, everything about the world and backstory and all that. Maybe it's really not.
No cuts in Morrowind is a part of its immersive element of keeping you in character. Yeah, but like you could also just do cuts and it would have the exact same effect. No cuts doesn't add anything to immersion. If you want to talk about an immersive game, how about Amnesia: The Dark Descent? I would say that's a fairly immersive game. And Amnesia: The Dark Descent has cuts. Because Amnesia: The Dark Descent realizes that, the player doesn't actually need to be stuck in a bag while they're being dragged to like a prison area or whatever. It's just like, this is a point that people have made for some reason. And it's like with movies, like with, was it Sam Mendes or whoever made that World War I movie, 1917, I think it was? And it's like, oh my god, it's all one continuous cut, and they like have to hide the cuts in between like showcases of darkness or whatever, like within camera pans, or like when Birdman does it. And it's like, yeah, there's ways of doing long takes that add something to a work, but it's not an inherent thing of like a cut is a bad thing. Come on. Let's go rant. It does add to immersion. I just don't believe that in any way. I think that I think you can achieve the exact same thing. I don't understand how me having to walk my ass with the character through a sequence rather than just have my character be teleported by the game so that the story can flow better does anything for immersion.
Listen to it deliberately because I want, but if I don't want to, I'll go naked and throw grenades. One last bit that I wanted to...
Do cutscenes count as cuts because there are a couple of cutscenes? If there's a cut in the cutscene, I guess.
This is difficult to do, and it requires, I think, quite a lot of skill. But, we are in a GDC, and I think it's a perfect audience to talk about it. Exposition in general is difficult to do well. And a bit in Witcher 3, but I think in Cyberpunk we kind of learned it, how to do it well. And
Starfield is not anybody's favorite game of all time or anything, but... Imagine if they removed the fast travel so that you would have to fly through an empty space all the time, because it's more immersive that way. You're kind of immersing yourself in that NASA fantasy. People would be like, hey, yeah, this is an interesting sort of artsy experimental game, but it would not make $1 billion because most people are not going to sit in a spaceship for 7 hours or however long it takes to fly.
Here's an example when
like Silent Hill. That's an amazingly immersive game. It has a lot of cuts, and I can't imagine how that game would in any way be improved by removing the cuts. I don't think it would be more immersive. I think that it actually gets a lot of its immersion from the cuts because the cuts are often so drastic, and it's just like this violent change of scenery, and it sort of really amps up the whole atmosphere of what is this place, what is real, what isn't real. Like, am I in a dream? Am I like, what is going on here? That is, I think, much more emphasized with the way it uses those cuts.
She greets you, and she has a uniform. That's cool. But she also has a real
exposition can be partially moved into the world and outside of the scenes. And
her skin is like dark gold. It's like a dark gold kind of a shade, and it's surprising in a way because it turns out that in this world, and your skin is a part of your attire. You wear it to work. That's basically normal thing. However, here in the story, we never address it. There's not a moment when we in the story point out finger to that and tell you that as a player. But you can actually understand it if you look at what's going on. You can actually understand, so this is what this world is. This is how it's constructed. And it's normal and natural to be like this. And, when you're moving through Cyberpunk, you'll actually see lots of those. Commercials, for instance, that we have in the game, the TV, the radio, all of them are actually about this. They're the subtle exposition. And subtle exposition is about the values that are underlying your narrative, underlying your world. And we wanted to make sure that those values stick through, but they are never directly given to you. We never point out finger to it, almost never. We basically try to make you like soak in that world and really be in that world. Let me move on because I'm far from being brief. So that concludes the brevity point. Let's move on now to choices and consequences. Now, my dears, this section is really...
I think, for example, Oblivion and Skyrim forcing perspective switches at certain moments made them less immersive. Anything can be done poorly. But the idea that a cut is inherently somehow immersion breaking, I think that's a bad idea.
really gigantic, and I could have a completely separate talk about this, so I will be deliberately picking just some elements of that. There's more to it, but there are some things that I think are really important, or things that I learned throughout our work in the project.
Construct dilemmas and ambiguous situations, unclear and open for the player's interpretation. Okay.
This example that you're seeing right now is Geralt, who is facing the tree, you can call it, the heart of the tree. And then there's the choice that you're supposed to make. Now, what we have done here deliberately as the designers, we have built up both sides of that story, both sides between those you're choosing, so that you have no idea exactly what's going to happen. This is an example of the choice where actually bad things happen no matter what you choose. We sometimes do that. Sometimes we don't, but sometimes we do, and that's a matter of a play between us as creators and you as an audience. In this specific case, we wanted to make sure that you will make a bad choice no matter what, and that was the design. However, all of those sides are actually very carefully created and very carefully structured. As a player, you don't really know what's going to happen, but both sides sort of have been presented to you. And those emotional dilemmas, those interesting dilemmas, are like they are making the best possible choices you can actually have in your game. Really, like
Silent Hill wouldn't work because of the perspective. If the camera was behind the back of the protagonist, I do think cuts would benefit the immersion. I don't think perspective has anything to do with it.
When you're choosing if you want to do a quest or not is not really an exciting choice. Maybe if you want to have sex with a character, that's probably also not exciting because everyone will choose it. So because of that, like, it's really good to think about what is actually a moral dilemma and what is really not obvious. What is really not obvious? There's so many things in our world that are not obvious and things that, everyone fights on social media every single day. It is not that difficult to create those dilemmas and make sure that the player has really something to think about. In here, actually, you have another example. There's a moment when Placide, he's one of the frontmen of the Voodoo Boys gang, so he actually double crosses you, and as a player, I'm pissed at this guy. And when I meet him, I will fucking punch him in the face.
Hey!
The game gives you exactly
swearing.
And this is what we learned actually throughout working Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077. When it feels right that the given choice should be there, then we as the designers, we should provide it to the player. Because in most cases, it means that we have created that.
This is also interesting, though, because we've talked a lot about this recently with Starfield, where provide choices that are logically expected both by the player and the main character. I feel like you should provide every possible choice the player can make at every single instance. If the player is able to shoot people, then every single choice branch needs to account for the player just shooting everybody. Even if they're like halfway through a quest and they've been doing everything right, they've been romancing everyone, the quest should be robust enough, I feel, to accommodate the player just deciding, I'm tired of this quest now and I'm going to kill everybody. Because I guess it's different because I'm more so talking maybe about a Fallout New Vegas, where the idea of the player getting to play their own character in this world is much more emphasized maybe than in Cyberpunk, which comes across now that I've been watching this for a while. It comes across as a much more hand-holdy experience. But I don't think it should be in the hands of the developers to decide, like, no, now you can do violence upon the enemy. And if you don't want the player killing this guy here, then maybe you should have like a glass wall separating the two while they have this confrontation. That's fine, but, providing choices that are logically expected both by the player and the main character, I feel like the logic is sort of dictated by what the game allows the player to do at every moment. And suddenly locking moves away from the player at like every instance because you want to tell a specific story rather than allowing the game to just organically tell its own story, I feel like it's always, it always leaves a bad taste in the mouth. What if he starts showing hot dogs? That would be cool. The hand-holding in Cyberpunk ruined it. Yeah. I didn't get hot dogs last time either. Yeah, you guys, I've had like 10 hot dogs that I haven't showed you guys. Because you guys are always mean to me when I show you the pictures of the hot dogs.
Situation in a way that as a player you're really believing you should be given the choice and given
buy silver.
And that's always the philosophy that we have, that when we were playing our
wait,
quests,
you were leaving?
Working on them, we
you
asked
gotta bow.
does it feel fine that I can't do something here? And sometimes it does. Sometimes you may want to not give a choice because you want to make a point. And that's also fine. You just need to be conscious about it as a designer. For me, it's really amazing when I watch like streamers and YouTubers, influencers, when I see them play our games and they literally at the moment when they say, I fucking hate this guy, I want to punch him. And then the choice
Hey! He swore again.
To do that. Like that happened with Fingers, that happened with Placide.
Okay. I joke, but also I don't like swearing on my channel. I would appreciate it if GDC censored that stuff.
This means that the design was on point, and we have actually felt right, because then as a player, you're in shoes of V, you felt you're not forced into any choices, and you really feel, okay, the design's provided me that, and I can be that person. I can really roleplay that person.
Yeah, I can really roleplay that person you set up for me. But like, you also know for a fact that there are times where the player wanted to use violence, but the violence was not an option because the developers didn't think it was logical. It's like everybody's gonna come to these situations differently.
Now,
this isn't on New Vegas. This game does not
around,
devote itself to role playing nearly as hard. It seems like, but
there is Ceres.
Still.
She is a daughter of Krach Hjalmar, and she's a daughter of Krach and Krein. And then
set up the stakes properly
brother,
before the
Hjalmar.
key choice moment.
They
Yeah,
are both on a
that sounds
race for
reasonable.
crown, but as a player, you are really presented.
Have I
with a
heard of
choice
Young
that is
Defiant?
not too technical. This is a negative example. of the show
Maybe.
right now. The Ceres in a story, she has been structured in a way that she will be always.
Sounds kind of familiar, but I couldn't tell you
do
anything
too
about
well
it just from your
preparing that
name.
choice. And that's why I'm giving you this example to show you that it's difficult, and we do not always get those things right. Because Ceres was preferred by many people because she was more interesting as a character. She looked better than Hjalmar. She had more screen time.
Oh,
she was
you
written in
can't
a
say
better way.
that.
And then when you have Hjalmar, who has so many downsides, much less people will choose him. So you need to think about those things. And when it comes to Cyberpunk, actually, we have discovered that also a very interesting factor, which is the star power. We have.
Do you think essential NPCs are always good to avoid, or are there exceptions? Like, so Snail has essential NPCs, and there's just a rule in Snail: you can't kill the NPCs. I'm not opposed inherently to that, but it always feels like the more you make your game about player choice, the more I feel like you actually need to realize that the player is gonna make choices that, like, the story has to be accommodating to every choice if your game is really choice heavy. But in something like, a Silent Hill, if Silent Hill is actually a really bad example because there's very few moments where you're actually hanging out with a character. And like if you're like in Silent Hill 2, when you're hanging out with Maria, you can actually shoot and kill Maria, and then you just get a game over, which is really great for when you do combat with her. But say Silent Hill 1, in the beginning, Sybil hadn't left, and it was just you and Sybil in the restaurant together, and Sybil was like, I'm gonna go check this place out, you go there, but I'm gonna get a cup of coffee first or whatever, and she just stays in the diner. I don't think Silent Hill 1 would be an improved game if you could shoot her and kill her, and then, the game just sort of accommodates that choice you made at that point. I think it's okay for the game to just make Sybil immortal in that sequence. That doesn't bother me. But I do appreciate, especially in these sorts of choice-forced, like if you're doing a really choice-focused game, I think it is kind of incumbent upon you to not make essential NPCs. Or if you're gonna make essential NPCs, you have to sort of fold it within the reality of the game. So, like, you can't kill, like, imagine like you had, like, Yes Man in New Vegas. He's a robot, so it shouldn't matter to Yes Man if you shoot him, right? Because he can just, like, get a new body and keep talking to you. And then he's functionally immortal, but it's folded into the reality of the game. Or, you could just have a character talk to the player from like a gigantic metal cylinder or like a gigantic tower, and they just talk to the player from like a bullhorn, and the player can't get up there. Like there's ways of doing essential NPCs like that, sort of unkillable characters. I just feel like if you want to do an unkillable character, just present the character in a way that it's impossible for me to kill them. Don't make them unkillable. But this also, I think this really scales with how important player choice is to the story. Yeah, it really does depend on what the game promotes itself as. Like in Elden Ring, you can't kill anybody in the Round Table Hold. Like there's no violence in the Round Table Hold. I don't think the game suffers from that. Like I never bothered trying to kill anybody there. And, like, Bloodborne, you could kill the doll, but you could still level up. And you could attack Gurman, but Gurman would just, like, fizzle away as, like, a ghost. And I think he was, like, laughing at you while you did it. And I'm like, this, like, you could just make them immortal. Or you could just shut off the player's weapons in that sequence. It's like, it's the same thing, kinda, I don't know. I don't know.
Idris Elba playing in Phantom Liberty, we need to take into account the fact that every time when we have a star, players are going to fall for a star almost all the time. Therefore,
No, absolutely not. I couldn't care less if you put like a famous person in a video game. Surprisingly enough, you know, because I played Death Stranding. I love Mads Mikkelsen. I couldn't tell you what the character's name was in that game. I felt so little for that whole story.
for Johnny Silverhand, when you meet him first time in Cyberpunk, he's a real asshole. Because we wanted to make sure that we draw this really big arc from him being a horrible person to the point that you actually really like this guy at the end and really understand him. But we thought about this from the very beginning.
You can kill everyone in Dark Souls 1. That's mostly true. I mean, you can't kill the Raven. But yeah, and you can't kill Anastasia in underneath Firelink Shrine. I don't think you can kill her. You can't kill Frampt, and you can't kill Koth. So it's like there are essential characters there, but that's also like that's not a very choice-heavy game. So the story doesn't really care if you kill Siegmeyer or if you kill Patches. It's just like, yeah, their individual quest lines don't advance after you kill them. But the actual story of the game, it's so loosely scripted. And that's like one of the cool things about it is that it's just mapped onto how you play the game. So like the story advances because you kill bosses. And you get access to new areas, which gives you access to kill new bosses. So, yeah.
Star power of Keanu Reeves in this case, he will skew your choices.
Johnny Silverhand was a cool character, was a good character. Maybe. I remember there was a lot of hype when Keanu came out on stage.
Let's look actually an example from one of the quests that I've done for Cyberpunk 2077. This is a moment when you are
Aesir trashing my beloved God of War and Death Stranding. They didn't land for me, you know? Like, it's not wrong to have disagreements about this stuff, you know? You feel free to like them. If you felt something from them, then the games worked for you. They didn't work for me. It's fine.
In All Food Factory, where you
can even kill the child in Kingsfield, the Ancient City. You can kill the child in Kingsfield, the Ancient City, but you should never admit to doing that, especially on this stream. You're liable to get yourself banned.
Look at this example.
Nah, I kill a kid. I don't care. But yeah, so like if you want to see another example of how to get around like with killing when you have, strictly speaking, killable characters, Grand Theft Auto doesn't have any kids. There are no children in the Grand Theft Auto games because it's just logistically easier to not put any kids in the streets and hope the player doesn't notice than it is to make the kids immortal because, oh my god, imagine if the player killed some kids. Skyrim. You know, so just if the player can kill almost every character, at that point maybe they should be able to kill every character. But you know, I don't know.
Deal with her talk. No fucking way. Remember that tape from All Foods? That's the Rimbo who did Royce. No.
I'm wondering how Baldur's Gate 3 got away with it, since that's exactly what got Fallout 1 and 2 banned and then censored in Europe. Maybe just, I don't know, has the censorship standard changed? I don't know.
Look at this. A chance at a neck in the barrel.
Get the fuck out! Now!
That's the
Again, swearing.
Not blind! What do you want?
Watch out for that one.
I also see, because here's something going on. Here's something really cool going on. The closed captioning in this entire stream has been able to catch every single instance of them swearing. Why can't I play this with a swear, like with a bleep filter? That just, because the AI here is really good at catching it for me. Why can't it bleep it out for me?
Best ISIS. Mean anything to you?
You work with her?
No, just gotta talk. Heard she's here.
Gotta talk. Sure. I'll take you. In here, actually, you can see another example. There's a moment.
I don't think anyone cares anymore about kid killing. I think lawyers and marketing people care about it.
I am doing telegraphy. This is how we call it. We are at the moment when you have actually made your choices. Those choices come into something, and at the end, when you meet that character, he is there talking to you in person. And I, as a designer, I'm telegraphing in as many.
But I also think it's a question of like, if it's just like, yeah, you can ruthlessly go down a street and mow down some kids. I think that's very different from maybe having a quest that involves a kid dying. Like that's That's obviously a very different thing. I think you could absolutely just release a game like if Uncharted 5 comes out and Nate's kid gets like a cancer and passes away or whatever. That's obviously very different from you can just go down into this little village here in Tibet and shoot all the little kitties.
Or if you kill them, there's Patricia that she basically.
Why is Fallout still censored on Steam? I don't know.
You talk to them. The story develops
Blame
in a completely
Bethesda.
different way. They walk you through different paths.
Kill
they walk
lawyers.
You through different rooms. This is called telegraphing. When you're showing your consequences to the player, use
Could you
every
imagine
possible
a
trick you
world
have to make
without
them
any
realize that is the
lawyers?
choice. One of the things that we have realized when working on Cyberpunk 2077 is the fact that when consequences.
I think
are
the
too
uploader has to bleep the words manually. Yeah, but this is auto-generated.
Players won't see them. And I will show you more examples of that in a moment. Here, like the choices, the consequences that come in that are really clearly telegraphed are always the best. And players are always surprised and they love it. They really love it. And it's not really that expensive in terms of budget to make. So, and those...
Delayed and really delayed consequences make the biggest impression on players. See, I sort of agree. I really like when choices I made way earlier are baked really deep into the game's systems and come up way later. Biggest impression on players, though. I don't know about biggest impression of player, but they do make an impression. I feel like Tom Sawyer probably had a better take on this, though.
The best. In here, you could have made the choice in prologue, and this quest comes in like really late in the game. It's a part of a storyline of Kira Eurodyne that is like pretty much one of the last like main characters that we're introducing to the game. You as a player, you probably forgot what happened. That's why when you walk in, they have a chat, and in that chat they say, "Hey, is it that gong that Zero Royce and Offwoods?" That's the reason why that line is there.
Only problem with kids is when there is no commitment to either direction. I don't like Oceros holding an invisible ocelot. Yeah, I feel like Oceros, rather than holding nothing, probably should have just been holding a doll or something like that, and it's just like, oh, he's gone crazy, he's lost his mind, or something like that. It's just like,
hey player, do you remember?
Because FromSoft really likes having kids die in their games, but never showing you the kids.
There, right? Telegraphing on every level, because like the game of Cyberpunk is gigantic. Players don't remember all of those characters, everything that happened. Besides, I don't know what happened in their life. Player could have played, 10 days straight for 20 hours every single day and got there, or they might have took 5 years to play it. Their kids might have born, in the middle. Who knows?
Anyone remember that old ass review that was like Tomb Raider should give Lara breast cancer to increase the drama? That's Navigator, man. That's gaming in the Clinton years. You're talking about what's his name? George something. That crazy guy who did all those insane reviews. I love that man. You will not slander him in my chat.
You never know what happened to the player, so that's why you need to telegraph very clearly. Another example, actually, this is the one that is a negative example, I would say. We've put a lot of effort in Cyberpunk 2077 in television and radio content. And again, players who actually paid attention to that liked it and really appreciated that. But most of players...
Yeah, I did remember. Of course I remember.
It's even there.
I'm an expert gamer. This is what every expert gamer knows.
Designed for
I love
visibility.
Navigator.
Think how you can actually show it to the player in any possible way. When you're designing something that's super obscure and nobody will...
Let's see if we can just find it real quick.
We'll see.
Hey. Here it is.
It's no big surprise that IDOS is moving up the video game food chain considering last year's mega hit Tomb Raider. The sequel uses the same formula to great success, with minor control changes for sidestepping, and of course, all new worlds and vehicles. The game starts off with a peek at ancient China. A dragon attacks the Great Wall, and a soldier notices a dagger embedded in his chest. Oddly, removing the dagger results in the dragon's death. Weird. You play Lara Croft, complete with front-loaded anvils, searching for the dagger centuries later. Your path to the dagger will take you just about everywhere, and that snow speeder kicks a major you-know-what. Tomb Raider has slightly more action.
I love how he's confident in just saying, like, you play as Lara Croft with huge bazongas, and also the snowspeeder kicks some you-know-what. It's like, you can say front-loaded anvils, but you can't say ass.
Than exploration this time around, but you may not notice the difference. This is good, because that way everybody's happy. Obviously, we're giving Tomb Raider 2 a good review. We fully expected to do so. We knew the game would be great, and it is, and we've only just scratched the surface. In answer to Lara's giant earrings, however, we have a challenge to Eidos. In Tomb Raider 3, create a storyline in which Lara gets breast cancer. Imagine the drama of a vulnerable Lara Croft still persisting in her worldly adventures despite her illness. It needs fleshing out, no pun intended, but we guarantee the gaming world would be shocked, stunned, and moved at the effort to make Lara's character more meaningful. We love Lara, but it's about time the industry had a big shock for a change. It's no shock that Tomb Raider 2 is excellent. Everyone should buy it, period.
I feel like that's kind of in line with what we've been watching with CD Projekt Red guys. Like, you have to create an emotional bond, and then you need to do a big emotional shock, bang moment, you know?
The end.
With Lara having breast cancer, would that be an emotional bang, do you guys think? Oh, this guy was crazy.
It makes no sense. Really, it makes no sense to spend that budget. Because for the player, something that player didn't see...
Was this satire? He made like 130 reviews. I don't think it was satire. I think he just had an insane writer, and he just narrated all of this stuff.
And again, maybe they're Redditors, they will go to Reddit and, they will read about it and they'll be all excited that it actually is there, but that is a fracture of your player base. Majority of them, if they don't find it, they assume it's not there. And this is what happened for Cyberpunk quite a lot, actually. Like, a lot of our consequences have been subtle, have been situations...
How does breast cancer affect her gameplay? Maybe, maybe you need to have, like, chemotherapy, and she's, like, woozy from the chemo, and she's, like, losing muscle mass from the chemo, so she can't do quite as big jumps or something. Maybe if she, heaven forbid, if she has to have surgery to have one of her breasts removed, that puts her off balance, and you can gamify that. Or you could just not do this insane storyline which this lunatic came up with.
Character appears somewhere, they're mentioned, you can meet people that you have saved, For instance, in this example, depending on your choices, some of the TV content changes or radio content changes. Pretty much nobody realized that for quite a long time.
She has to stop and check herself for lumps every checkpoint.
So really designed for visibility, especially when you're spending as much budget as we have spent on all of the radio content. My dears, that concludes consequences. I'm actually not that...
They should do that in the next Uncharted then. Have like Nate have testicular cancer and he has to check himself for lumps every now and then.
Bad with the time, no, I'm horrible. Okay, let's move on because... They
could use the haptic feedback from the DualShock 5. Yeah, Thoreau, use the analog stick to feel for mass, yeah.
We have like 4 more, but thankfully we have whole day. So, we'll be talking about over-design, novelty, and effectiveness here. I have quite a lot, so I'll be short right now. There is a moment when we as designers, we really feel that our ego speaks to us, right? And we want to make the best possible...
Beware of over-design. A game is not a life simulator, but entertainment. This is the smartest thing he said all day. This is one of the most important lessons people need to learn in game design, especially like when you're new to designing games. Your game is never a life... It's not a simulator of real life. I don't like the word entertainment. I like to think of a game as a story manager. It's not a simulator.
We can. An example here. Panam is here sitting in a bar, sipping a beer in the prologue of Cyberpunk. You can actually meet her. And throughout the early stages of the work on the game, through conversations, hey, should she maybe finish the beer, get into the car, leave, drive to Badlands, meet the nomads, you can follow her, see all of that. Okay, but what the hell is the point of that? You always need to ask yourself a question, okay, why this is even in the game, why I would be even adding that. Details are amazing when they matter, when there's some kind of a meaning behind them, when there's a reason behind it. Adding that stuff is really makes no sense. And always when you're working on a thing, you need to ask yourself a question, am I actually designing or over-designing at this?
So last stream we talked about Grand Theft Auto 4 and how when you play Grand Theft Auto 4, by following the laws, you begin to notice dialogue, conversations you never noticed before. You notice that a man in the park is reading a book that you never noticed before, and he's like reading it page from page. I like the ethos here, but when he's talking about don't put too many details that don't matter in, it's like, those details add up and create like a sort of wholeness for the work. Obviously, don't just add crap for the sake of adding crap, but I don't see how he can talk about letting the player smoke a fat doobie with this lady here. Like, I don't see how he can talk about give enough screen time and space for each story. Like, he can be like, yeah, you're just hanging out with her and you're not doing anything. And it's just like there to building a bond or whatever. I don't see how he can commit to this and then be like, but don't put too many details in there that don't matter. Don't add anything to the story. it's just like it feels kind of weird. It feels kind of weak, you know. Like I get that there's a difference between adding quiet time and adding little over-designed details. I'm just like, you know, I agree with this. But when he starts talking, I don't 100% agree.
When there's a reason behind it. Adding that stuff is really makes no sense. And always when you're working on a thing, you need to ask yourself a question, am I actually designing or over-designing at this point? I remember throughout work on Cyberpunk 2077, one of my designers changed his title on Slack to Quest Over Designer. So another example I wanted to show you is the example from Cool Metal Fire. This is the quest. This is the moment when Johnny Silverhand for the first time takes over your body. And in here, actually, what I did together with cinematic designer Łukasz Śliwa, we've made a decision that there's no point of actually V as Johnny, because Johnny has control over your body at the time, to meet the rogue and with her actually talk about everything and really repeat everything that was said. We've decided to use a cut here and basically jump.
Oh, so now there's a cut. Earlier he was talking about there's no cut, but now there's a cut.
Directly to the most important things. And then there is a moment after that when you wake up in that hotel. You feel you have blood on your hands, you know.
I wouldn't have picked up on that if we hadn't had that whole rant about cuts earlier.
So Rogue is there, and it turns out they already talked and established everything, and she knows all the important elements. So this ties up a bit to the brevity I talked about, but also like we knew that okay, we could actually design here an amazing long scene and do all of that, but we felt it's really not needed because in most cases it will be just
cuts out of the back, yeah.
And that is the over design. I'm speeding up slightly because we're short on time. So now let's go to the bravery. Now I really love this quest.
Bravery. Yeah, okay, bravery. I thought it said brevity for a moment.
I'm speeding up slightly because we're short on time. Okay. So now let's go to the bravery. Now I really love this quest, but this requires some introduction before I'm going to roll that clip. So my dears, there's a quest in Cyberpunk 2077 when you meet Joshua Stevenson. He is a convict, and he during his time in prison, he decides to go back to God. He wants to die. But die in a specific, and he knows he will die. He is sentenced to death, but he wants to die in a specific way. He has a purpose. He wants to die and become a symbol for everyone else. And in our world, we have something called brain dances. As a brain dance, you can record that brain dance and make someone else exactly feel and experience what you feel. So what Joshua Stevenson does, he gets in contact with a brain dance studio, and they agree on so that he will die on a cross. And they will record that as brain dance for everyone who's a follower, for everyone who can actually go through that experience. And there's a lot of build-up leading up to that scene. I wanted to make sure that you know all the context because that context is really important. We pay a lot of attention to that. We had incredible writer, Marcin Blacha, our story director.
Marcin blah blah.
Who wrote the dialogues for this attention to that. We had incredible writer, Marcin Blacha,
Marcin Blacha.
Our story director who wrote the dialogues for this quest to really make sure that we flesh it out before actually that happens. Let's look at watch it together.
You're not the Messiah. Save yourself and save us.
Ouch. It would probably hurt like hell to be crucified like this.
Do you not fear God? You stand condemned under the same sentence.
Oh, right in the wrist. Oof.
Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
I'm really looking forwards to what the hell he's talking about with the bravery in quest design and how it relates to this. I swear to God, if his point is, well, we wanted to push the envelope by putting out something that would offend a lot of people, if that's his point, I'm gonna drink bleach because
remember me when you come into
he's
your
making me
kingdom.
watch this ridiculous sequence. Imagine if this game came out in 2005. There were much more hardcore games than this coming out in 2005. What are you talking about?
Truly, I say to you,
Like, compare this to the lying figure in Silent Hill 2 from 2002.
today you will be with me.
That's
in
just like
paradise.
this is like a monster that's the living manifestation of rape, and it was so much more impactful because it was so much more artful. It's tasteful, in fact. strangely enough. Versus this geezer. Like, oh my god, you have to nail the cross in. Remember the Postal games?
At the very beginning, when we were working on this quest, when the designer who actually designed it, Przemek Tarczyński, when he came to me, actually this quest was about something else. At the very beginning, you as a player, you were accompanying Joshua Stevenson, and in the end, you were delivering him to Branga's studio, and this is where it ended. And I told him, Przemek, but we have this amazing interactive scene system. I want to be in the shoes of that Roman soldier.
Didn't Jesus get it through the hands, not the wrists? I don't know. I feel like through the wrist would be smarter. I feel like if you did it through the hand, surely is the hand tissue strong enough to hold up the weight of a fully grown human being?
Who actually hammers him to the cross? Because this you can really put the player in that.
Oh yeah. The abstract daddy, not the lying figure. The lying figure is just a guy in a straitjacket. Yeah, the abstract daddy. Yeah, and the abstract daddy is also a manifest. It's like both a man violating a woman. And it's also a man suffocating a woman, because it's like both of them are seeing this, like their sort of horror in the same figure. It's really interesting.
And you can really make the player feel it. And you can really make it be like this. And our amazing cinematic team really made it happen. And I honestly believe that we as a AAA industry are so scared of new topics, of things that require very bravery.
It was through the wrist?
This quest has a lot of context. It's not an edgy scene for being an edgy scene. It's a scene about the person. It's a quest about the religion, about belief. It's the really gruesome and dark world. That's why all of those elements about religion, spirituality, and being in close connection with other people actually matter so much. And this is a very important element to have in your game. In most AAA, and I'm speaking about this because like the indies are actually doing a much better job here. In most AAAs, you don't really see that. We are so safe with everything that we're building.
Okay, yeah, but like, brother, like this is not brave. This is very safe. This is a very tame thing to do in your game. Like Pillars of Eternity opens up and you go to this village that has like I think it had like the hanging tree from Berserk, and it's like, well, all the kids are stillborn here, and it's like, yeah, you know, I don't know. I feel like this is not all that brave. I don't know.
There's another example I wanted to show you. Actually, when I was working on Bloody Baron storyline from The Witcher 3, there was a moment when, I came up with the idea of botchlink, this miscarried child, that Baron has. And there was a lot of concern. We had some young fathers.
I don't know. Like, are there any really taboo topics anymore? Hasn't everything kind of been done? Like, I don't know. I feel like there's not a single topic a game has ever touched on in a long time where I was like, whoa, I can't believe a game talked about this. Because now it's talking about abortion, and it's like, well, Silent Hill 3.
In the company, and they were pointing out to me that they are maybe not too comfortable having a zombie child in the game. But when we talked, I told them what it is about. It's about domestic violence. It's about this broken father who's a parallel to Geralt.
Tropes that subvert Christianity have been done so many times, it's old hat. Yeah. I honestly, I honestly think if you actually want to be brave, imagine if instead of having like you nail the cross into the hand or whatever, imagine if you just had like a kind of an uplifting kind of religious journey with him there. And it's like, no, we're not doing any shock value. We're just like playing it as like a beautiful little serene scene for him because he's having a religious experience and that's how he perceives it. Like, I think that would have been a lot braver because I wouldn't have expected that. I would have always expected that I'm going to nail the guy to the cross.
Do his best and actually understanding all of his shortcomings. And then there is a moment when he actually takes the botchling in his arms and walks with him. That whole sequence when he carries him, in the files, in the game files.
The thieves were hanging on ropes, only Jesus was nailed in.
To actually undo in a way as much as he can to do what he has done to his family. And that was important. It's not a shocking value.
It doesn't have the same impact when it's so on the nose. Yeah.
And again, we are talking about 2012. At that time in AAAs, you didn't see topics like this. Nowadays, it's maybe.
I think The Witcher 3 quest he's showing was the most taboo with domestic violence and reconciliation. Yeah, maybe.
Different, especially in the indie space. But at that time, it was something that nobody has ever done.
It is actually played as uplifting in game. Yeah, but I mean, like,
this is our responsibility.
Like, he was talking, and again, like, I haven't played the game, so I'm not 100% sure about what the scene plays like, but he was talking about this as, like, he's recording a memory that other people can live through to have, like, a religious experience. and you could probably accomplish, like, if that's all you're doing, like, it could just be a sequence where we're gonna go to a river and you're gonna be baptized, right? And because all the water in our universe is super polluted because it's a cyberpunk universe, so we've constructed this artificial little river specifically to record this so that future followers can be baptized in like a clean environment, like a serene, beautiful, clean environment. You can kind of like it's the same basic idea where you're trying to give a religious experience to people who play this memory later. But I feel like one of them is going for shock value. The other one is maybe being a bit more respectful.
And especially this is how I see it.
Spoiler, it didn't work.
And I know that a lot of directors is with me in this. Like, we have a purpose of basically doing something else, something different. Because
showing religion in a positive light in 2023.
It needs to feel like our game.
I would say, you know, I don't want to point any fingers here, but there are some people in chat who could use some religion. You guys often get very horny.
That sometimes nobody else will do. There's another example from here.
The Bloodborne quest was good. It actually had some nuance. Okay.
Don't fear the Reaper. There's a moment when actually, if you have built a relationship with Johnny, who will at some point offer you that he can actually join you on this one-to-one suicide mission on Arasaka. That was something that our quest designer Edo Varendi proposed. He felt that it was needed in this given moment to give the players something like this. And we were like, this is so fucking bold. We should probably do it.
Hey!
And that was basically how the conversation went. We really wanted to give you that option as the players, and we found out ways how to do that. If you go in there solo on Arasaka, when you die, the credits roll, because that is your ending. And of course, you know, a lot of players proven us that they are able to beat it.
Okay, I like that though. I like that it's like, hey, you know, let's take the fight to them, and you're like, okay, and then you die, and it's just like
that whole sequence.
You died.
My dears, there's much more going on, and it's 6 minutes left, so we are going.
Not me. I'm like the least horniest here. Yeah. You're the least horny. You're not the one I'm pointing at here. You're not the biggest offender.
We're going to speed up even more. I wanted to show you in one of the scenes an example where our interactive scene system is used here as a matter of novelty. It was an important element of the innovation that we've been doing for Cyberpunk 2077. Let's look.
It would be interesting to see a game that was based on pre-European, pre-Christian values. Yeah, I mean, I feel like whenever games do religion, I feel it's very rarely where religion is played in like a positive light. It's often like when you do, it's often just shock value. It's often just, here are some primitive people, and you know they're primitive because they have pagan gods rather than our noble good gods or whatever. I don't know. I feel like you could definitely do a game that's more about, and I feel like maybe I'm trying to dig up some examples right now. I feel like Morrowind has like an interesting take on religion. But I don't know. I always feel like, because there's people who like take these ideas and this religion and these images, they take them very seriously, and it's always just like, you know, you're not saying anything by being so disregardant, by being so like, I don't know, shock value-y with the things some people take really seriously. Yeah, I don't know.
Watch it together.
Game devs don't know how polytheism works. Yeah, I don't know if it's a question of they don't know how it works. I think it's often just like, you know, oh, we have a tribe here. Like, the player has to be able to kill some primitive cave people. What do cave people do all day? I don't know. They pray to their evil bone god. Okay, what's their evil bone god? It's like an evil bone god guy, and he asks for sacrifices from evil savages. And they have to be savages because we can't have any, like, the player has to kill them, and the player's the good guy. So they need to be bad, and the way they're bad is because they have a bad god or whatever. It's just like, you know, it's I don't know.
Well, shit.
Morrowind asked, okay, what if a society built on demon worship had some redeeming qualities? but like, Morrowind was also about interpretation, you know? It's about, like, you go to these different factions, and there's, like, different interpretations of deep sort of religious moments that happened in this universe. And, like, are you the reborn Nerevar, or are you just a guy who's sort of cheating the legacy, or like the mythology and the predictions and such? Like, it's exploring ideas, and maybe not the deepest thing in the world or anything, but it's interesting, you know.
Goes for you too. I'll stand. This so fucking hard.
Hey,
Fucking ass on the fucking couch.
stop! Oh my god, so
Thought
much
you'd
swearing.
never ask.
So
See
much.
us down for a planet bullet.
So much
Sit
swearing.
down.
This ain't gonna end well, but shit. Well, all
Game devs are very sheltered in general, as if their life experiences are experiences through simulacra and simulation only. I also think that because the game industry historically has been Japanese and American, and specifically it's been Japanese and Californian, and so there's just been a lot of I don't know if there's there's not a, I don't know, there's not a lot of games coming from the Bible Belt that have that perspective. So I don't know if it's just like a byproduct of where these games are being designed or whatever.
come on. Gotta lighten up. Take a hit.
Thanks, I'm good.
Whatever you say, straight-edge princess. Here we go. A flathead. Model MT-0 D12.
Need to see it.
Sue yourself. Fucking tricked out this thing. Dynamic thermo-optic camo armor. Full cognitive immersion with a Raven controller. Pimped out prototype actuators made of titanium, vanadium, Kevlar.
Cultural
composite.
divide is a big factor. Yeah, you know, because I'm still watching that VOD of Starfield, and it's like, oh my god, we're gonna imagine this amazing futuristic world. It's a brave future for mankind, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, that's not a brave anything. That's just California. Everybody has like that sort of, you know, that sort of cadence, and everybody kind of talks like this. It's like everybody's got like a bit of Tom Sawyer or Chris Avalon, like to their way that they speak, because most of these voice actors were probably, you know, probably raised near Santa Fe or, or Los Angeles, so you can always sort of pick it up and like.
Watch this. Fully integrated link 2. So when the spider starts crawling up walls, dangling from ceilings.
Could lose your lunch.
So what you think?
Yep, we'll take it.
3. Sure.
If you live your life through social media and the internet, you get games
Rick
like
got it. It's all
Starfield.
paid off.
Yeah, I mean, I also just feel like I don't think Bethesda is really good at world design. I'm just like because again, I'm watching that VOD I talked about, and there's not a single faction that has shown up so far where I'm like, that's interesting, or like that's an interesting take on this setting. It's all just like very cookie cutter stuff.
I don't see any fucking brick around here, do you?
Yeah, I don't see any break here. So, my dears, this scene actually shows so many innovations that we have done in Cyberpunk 2077 when it comes to first-person perspective storytelling. And I wanted to mention this because of the Maya principle that I wanted to explain to you. Like, Maya principle is
Do I
something
like
that
Western
I think
RPGs
can
at all?
guide us a bit, when it comes to
Some of
working
them.
on a new novel things for our games. And basically defines
You have to
the
understand, I have such, I don't want to say refined, I have such hyper-specific tastes that you could show me a game that 99% of people will like, and if it doesn't do the things that I like, then I'm not going to like it, even though it's a great game for like most people. And that's not because my tastes are better, it's because my tastes have just become very, very niche. Which is better, Vardenfell or that island Kingsfield 2 is set in? Oh, Melanat? Vardenfell is better. Imagine liking games. Cheap out on writing by having the programmers do it. Wait, why are all of our stories shit? Yeah, like a little bit.
would actually provide as much novelty as you only
But
can.
like, you know, it's also, you don't just want to hire writers because writers know how to write stories, but you want to tell your stories with the interactive systems that you have, and you kind of want programmers to do it. You just want the programmers to have the sensibility. Like the programmers just. It's not that you want to hire writers necessarily. Just like hire, maybe teach your programmers how to write, or hire writers. I don't know.
Stay somewhat.
We do have, there's a big class of writers now that actually know how to work in video games.
As a player, you kind of get it. You know you're there, okay, you can look around, even though at first, actually a lot of other players...
Avalon can't hold the industry on his back, he's just one man. That's true, that's true.
Before, in time, of course, players learned, that they can actually do it. And incredible things about the scene done by Michał Brzeźniak, our cinematic designer. Amazing thing about the scene is that you can see how much staging was changing. The characters were moving. You were in a place, but actually the plans were changing. There was Royce in the background. When the door opened, he was there. Then he walks into you. We're actually, by changing things in the front of you, changing your frame. It took us actually a lot of time to get to the point that we understood how to build those things. So when it comes to the novelty, I really advise you to stick to the Maya principle. When you're like maybe worried about like just going too wacky and doing something that your game won't find its place on the market, it will guide you in a way of like how to do and what to do. Another example here is like actually coming from one of the quests I worked on. You need to establish the rules before you break them. This is a pretty simple rule. A lot of young designers really love to break the rules and they want to break all of the rules. You need to first show the rules that you have them.
Yeah, a lot of young designers love to break the rules. I know he's talking about a different thing here, but
they felt that they were just stiff because this is what they were taught to before. In time, build those. The rules, he's
talking about like presentation rather than sensibilities really, and stuff.
Be able to break them. I need to speed up slightly, so that's why we move on to effectiveness right away. And here is the one of the elements of effectiveness I wanted to talk to you about is the fact that you as a designer, you can really design your story and everything you have for the team you have. When I was actually working on like a Supreme Quest, I knew that my cinematic designer, in this case it was Michał Brzeźniak that I mentioned before, and David Cordero, animator, they actually are both guitar players, and they fucking love that stuff. So I knew that I can really basically design the whole concert when you were putting together
this guy
band, you're there.
Okay, we're never doing another stream with this guy. He swears way too much.
And playing with them. And I think this requires actually a lot of skill because you as a designers, you need to have bonds, human bonds with your teammates. You need to know the people you're working with because sometimes some certain stories or elements you will be able to pull off and others you won't be able to. And treat them like as assets, treat them as resources, as a thing that you can really help out with, be together with that and build together. But this requires you to know the people you're working with and know their strong sides and weak sides because then you can really build it for. I will just glance over those really fast, but this is the last 2 points. Pay attention to what other designers are building. This is an example from a quest from Philippe Weber, the parade in Cyberpunk 2077. When we designed that quest in 2019, we already knew what is in the game. Therefore, it was actually pretty easy to know that we are providing something different than other designers. Believe me or not, but if you're working with creatives, and probably some of you definitely feel it.
Yeah, I like this. I like this take of this. Do you guys remember in was it last year? When we had like 5 different games that were all like, oh, we're doing Dead Space, we're reviving the Dead Space genre. We had like the Callisto Protocol, we had the Dead Spaces remake, and there was like a bunch of other stuff. There was that one like Summer Game Fest or something Jeff Keighley hosted, where it was like there were so many like, oh, you're stranded on a space station or something like that. It was like you had a System Shock and you had like, I think Starfield was also shown. There's a lot of like sort of that sort of futuristic game kind of deal going on, and it was like, wow, they all are making kind of the same stuff, huh?
Creative people actually come up with the same ideas very often. Separate people will come up with the same ideas. That happens really. A situation when you actually have the team that communicates well and knows what the hell is happening in the game is really important because then you don't copy each other's ideas and you don't reuse the same solutions that you already have.
I think Bethesda is an exception. Wait a minute, I missed out on a conversation here. In fact, writing has been a last consideration for decades in gaming. It's just gotten worse recently. I think Bethesda is an exception in their case. They're just lazy and assuming people will accept subpar quality from them. Oh well, it's a Bethesda game. Yeah, I think there's a bit of that. Lazy. I think Bethesda's a really tragic case of because you have something like Fumito Ueda or Hideo Kojima who are like auteurs, but they also like they get budgets, so they're allowed to do what they want to do. And Todd Howard is that. Todd Howard is he can do whatever game he wants to do, because Bethesda games are going to make a lot of money. So there's just like, yeah, you write your own check, man. But he doesn't seem to have a really deep sense of games as art. I always go back to when he talked about how it's important to him that like Bethesda makes games where you can do anything you want to do. Like you see a fork, you can pick up that fork and you can rotate it. And it's like, what are you talking about rotating forks? Nobody cares about, like, that's nothing. And if you're gonna do that, then you have to incorporate that actually, like, meaningfully into the game. What are you doing? And he just makes these stories that don't at all gel with the way those games are designed. Because, like, it often just feels like they don't care about the story. But then they weirdly do, because they do a lot of work to try to make the stories into something, but there's just, like, I don't know. Like, Bethesda, maybe, I don't know. Like, I would say I would want somebody else than Todd Howard in charge of these games at this point, but I feel like if they replace Todd Howard, you kind of just get Bethesda Inc., right? You just like, well, we'll just get a guy, and who's the guy? It doesn't matter. Pete Hines is just going to make sure that he delivers things on time. And is he going to have the same creative freedom as Todd Howard? Probably not.
This is one of the quests that's actually one of the primary example of situation when
I think Todd makes games for himself, and he is easy to please. I should check out Wayward Realms. It's being developed by the original creators of the Elder Scrolls. Ooh.
Collaborated really well.
Maybe I should check that out.
Our expert, she knew everyone in the team. She knew their capabilities, knew what to do.
I was surprised to see Todd Howard on the list of auteurs. Don't know how to spell. I think that's the right way of spelling it. Yeah, but like...
Now I'm actually moving on.
Yeah, Todd Howard has skill, but he doesn't have taste. Cyber Ninja Zero. I think that's a really good way of... I think that's a good way of putting it. Like, anybody who could release Skyrim obviously has a lot of skill. Like, just coordinating that amount of manpower into any project is a skill. And there's clearly a love of games in their games, but there's not a lot of craft. There's not a lot of, like, again, I go to Morrowind. You can really see it when you go and play Fallout 3 and then you play Fallout New Vegas right after, and you're like, well, these are very different games. Fallout 3 feels a lot more like it's about exploring an atmosphere, whereas Fallout New Vegas is a lot more about, like, being a role-playing game and letting you make choices in these universes. But it's telling that Obsidian, in, like, what was it, a year or like 14 months or whatever, were able to just basically learn how to use the Bethesda engine and deliver on a game that was 100 times better in the role-playing department than what Bethesda was able to cook up. And when Bethesda made the engine, it's like,
take a look. All of those points are actually already
it's something
for you, so that you know what's going on. And here's the
check out the Fall of Avalon.
And now, I wanted to thank you so much for being here.
Todd Howard has clearly done something right, considering he's been at the helm for 3 decades. I mean, yeah, the games make money, so that's a very easy way of staying in charge. Neil Druckmann is, I think he's the president or the co-president of Naughty Dog at this point. He got a big promotion after The Last of Us 2 came out. But is that him doing something right? Because I'm just looking at Naughty Dog, and I noticed that all of the talented people who worked for them, they left because the management for The Last of Us 2 was so terrible, and there was so much crunch, and there was so much creative headbutting behind the scenes that they just bailed, and Sony created a new studio for them, and now they're working on some game in an established franchise. I forget what the name of the new studio is. It's something like Tell a Tale Studios or something like that. It's not that, but it's something like that. But I would really hope that. See, I would have preferred if they did something new, and I would have preferred they did something completely new. Don't do like, oh, we're doing a game about astronauts, and it's gonna play like Last of Us, and I was like, oh my god, just shoot me. But yeah, that's this. That was this stream. I was really hoping, rather than just talk about like these vague sort of governing rules, that he would talk about more nuts and bolts of quest design, being like, well, how do you make fetch quests interesting, right? How do you do detective missions? I was really hoping that was going to be what this stream was about, but I think we had something interesting to talk about. Telltale did that. It's not. I said tell a tale, but that's not what it's called. it's called something. It was all downhill after the original Crash trilogy. I think Naughty Dog's best game is Jak 3. Imagine if Bethesda licensed their janky engine out to more competent developers. Video games, yes. It seems like holding studios together is also a part of the problem. All the top talent leaves after one game is finished. Yeah, because making games is not a joke, and oftentimes it's kind of a nightmare to work on these games. Why would you want to keep doing that? You know, which one of the, was it Dan or Sam Houser who left Rockstar recently? Like, because they've had, I think it was something to do with how Grand Theft Auto 6 has basically been in development hell because they've had to go back to the drawing board so often to try to get something that works. I think that's why he left, or he left because there were some producers or managers above him telling him, like, you have to do this in your game, you have to do this in your game, and he was like, screw this, you know, I could just do my own thing, I could make my own studio, I don't have to work on this, I don't, you know, who wants that? How long has Grand Theft Auto 6 been in development? I think it's been in development to some capacity since Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. Not like, you know, a lot of that is obviously pre-production, but yeah. It's also just like, you know, games take 5 years to develop now, and, you know, you just like, you get bored and you want to do something else. And if I had spent 5 years working on The Last of Us 2, I would not be super looking forwards to, well, what else is Neil Druckmann gonna make me design? I'd be a lot more interested in, well, you know, I could make The Last of Us 3, or I could do what Lucas Pope did, and I could make Papers, Please, and I could just write my own check forever onwards. Like, he made Return of the Obra Dinn, and it's like, oh, I could just be my own developer, and I can do my own stuff. When did Grand Theft Auto 5 come out? 2013. Yeah. But yeah, you know, if anybody out there finds some interesting GDC talks, that would be fun. Maybe we could talk. We could watch more gaming in the Clinton years. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of a shame that we've done all of the sort of obviously good streams, huh? There's one on this channel called Sully the Witch about Armored Core 6. Daggerfall took 2 years and it was considered a super long time, if I recall correctly. Yeah, I can buy that. I'm waiting on you to cover the Destiny 2 Bungie GDC. Yeah. I'll do that eventually. Oh, can you guys see the night mode being activated? Yeah, this is totally over. Anyways, I'm gonna go and get something to drink and then maybe just go to sleep. Thanks everybody for coming out to the stream. Bye bye.